Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a update on my Outlander read along. So I have finished book 3 in the Outlander series, Voyager. You can see I lost a page while I was reading. That's okay. So yeah, today's video is just an update on how the read along is going, my highlights from this book, and then some more critical comments that I have just about the read and yeah, how it's going. So stick around. Okay, so an update on how it's going. I read very fast. I took this book on vacation with me. We were gone for a week at a cottage, and the first 2 days was quite wet, so not too much time outside, so I got a good chance to read. I finished on August 3rd or 4th, so I want to say it took me about 10 days to finish this book. That's because I had a lot of time to read, so that's why. I will start the next book early as well. The next book is Drums of Autumn, book number 4. So I have started. I'm purposely going to read a little bit slower, but I do want to read a little bit ahead so that once the school year starts in September, about a month from now, I'm not overwhelmed and feeling like, oh, I fall behind. So yeah, that's kind of the plan for reading, and hopefully it keeps going really, really well. Okay, so my highlights for this book. I have a couple of real highlights, really big things that happened that I absolutely love as a reader. Number one, my biggest highlight probably is that we meet an amazing character, young Ian, or Ian Murray, the son of Jenny and Ian, Jamie's sister and brother-in-law. I love young Ian. I don't think I'm alone. I think he's a fan favorite. As soon as we met him, my heart just like melted a little bit. He is a very funny character. He has a lot of just really funny things happen to him. He's described in the book as the type of person who things just happen to them, kind of through no fault of their own, but they're always involved in odd situations, semi-catastrophes. It usually turns out for good in the end, but during the situation, it just trouble just always seems to follow them in some weird way. He's also very young in this book. He's 14, turning 15 years old. So he's really at that kind of coming of age time, and coming of age stories are one of my favorite genres. I've always loved them. I still like them. So although he's not the main focus of this book, he is a big focus of this book because Jamie and Claire kind of have to contend with all his shenanigans, and they're getting him out of trouble and, kind of trying to take care of him, and he makes it really difficult, and he just seems to get involved in situations all the time. So yeah, I love that we meet him. None of the book is told from his perspective, but we do kind of see him quite a bit. He has some more serious talks with Jamie, which I really, really appreciated. It kind of showed Jamie mentoring a young man, which we haven't seen a ton of. We saw it a little bit with Fergus, but it's not really a big part of the story so far. And it was very cool to see that side of Jamie, kind of the uncle who takes care of him and, tries his best, isn't always successful. So yeah, that was my number one highlight. We meet young Ian. I love him. So excited to read the rest of the books and continue to see more of him. Okay, highlight number 2 is another character that pops up again. I talked about him a lot in my first video about this book, but I'll just quickly mention him again. John Gray is a part of this story. He finally meets Claire. So Claire goes back in time, reunites with Jamie. They're again separated on this ship voyage. Claire, in her role as a doctor and a surgeon, goes to another ship to kind of help them manage a pandemic that's happening on their ship. Kind of an interesting parallel to our current times. And she comes across this John Gray character. Now, he doesn't introduce himself by name, nor does she introduce herself by name. And even if they did, I don't know that they would have made the connection that they have this central person in their lives that connects them. Jamie And their first meeting is really funny. Claire is 100% herself, modern woman. She's swearing and she's punching the ship. She's so frustrated that, she's losing some patience. She loses a patient very close to her. And John Gray kind of comes across her and is not sure what to make of her because she's not acting in any way that is similar to a woman of his time. He kind of compares her to an army officer in her battle against this disease, and they have kind of this bonding moment, which is really, really nice. Then later, when they're in Jamaica, they meet again at a party, and Claire is extremely jealous of John Gray and Jamie's relationship. She sees kind of the affection and love that John has for Jamie on his face, and she's really put off. She's really upset. She didn't understand how close their friendship was. Jamie hadn't revealed that to her. So not only do we see how Claire and Jamie's marriage is kind of going and how they're having to learn things about each other again, and reveal parts of themselves that they haven't revealed to anybody else in the last 20 years. But you also see that Claire is extremely jealous, which I just thought was very interesting, and how much John loves Jamie, and how important that relationship is to both men, and how Claire kind of feels about that. You can't control your partner's friendships and definitely their past lives. They had relationships and dynamics that are important to them. And yeah, I just really enjoyed that. I love John Gray. Loved him in this book. So yeah, it was very good. Very well done. My third highlight is Fergus and Marsley. So I love Marsley. Love her. I think the first couple times I read this book, I didn't really like her. I didn't really get it. I love her. She reminds me a lot of Claire, very opinionated, very strong, goes after what she wants. Reminds me a little of Jamie. She will lie and cheat to get what she wants, but that's okay. I admire that in book characters. So I loved Marsley. She initially dislikes Claire, but comes around to her, and they kind of have a nice relationship. I'm not sure how much I like Fergus. I'll talk about that later in the video. He's definitely charming, dashing, handsome, French man, wonderful. Not sure I love him, but I really loved their wedding. Really, really loved it. So they are handfast in Scotland. That's how Fergus kind of sneaks Marsley along for the trip. Jamie's rule is that they need to get properly married in front of a priest before they can, be together. And so they find this priest in Jamaica who just smokes pot every day and is like out to lunch all the time. And the wedding is really funny, really funny. Anyway, just so charming. And that witnessing that wedding, I think, kind of brings it back home for Claire and Jamie. It reminds them of their own wedding, how the situation was not at all the same, but it has some similarities kind of thrown together at the last minute. Not very many guests, just kind of the people who were around them at the time, but how it was so special and how they're so lucky to have each other. So yeah, I really liked that part. That was a highlight for me. My last highlight, I think, is how exciting this book was to read. I mentioned before, I read it really quickly because I was at a cottage, I was on vacation, the weather was bad for the first 2 days, so I had a lot of time to read. That's definitely part of why I read this book so fast, but the other part was that it was just so exciting. There was always something new happening. It was definitely, the book is titled Voyager, definitely a voyage through time in that Claire time travels. Definitely just a regular voyage. They go on a sea voyage. They're in Scotland, they're in France rather. I think they are in Paris, and then they are like in a coastal city, I forget which one. Then they're on the ship, then they're on another ship, and then they're in the West Indies, and they're in Jamaica, and then finally the book ends up in America. So it was just an exciting, fast-paced book to read. And after reading book 2, which I did find a little slow, I mentioned before, not my fave, this was just really refreshing. It just kept me, even though I read it before, it was just really, really exciting. So yeah, I think that was my 4th highlight, how exciting of a book this was to read, and just how much fun I had reading it. So yeah, those are my highlights. I think next I'm going to talk about what I'm calling Diana Gabaldon's Unflinching Eye. That's what I'm going to call it. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what problems, issues that I have with this book. Yeah. So the first one is just a problem that I have with the book. It's just a problem that I have with the book. I can't sugarcoat it. So there is a character in the book named Yi-Ten Cho, also called Mr. Willoughby, and I just think it's not a positive portrayal of an Asian character. So I don't know. I hope other people aren't upset. I think it's okay to criticize books that you love. I think that's part of being a reader. That's part of being a reflective reader. It's important. I can still love the book and have a problem with a particular character or a particular plot point. And in this case, I do. I have a problem with the treatment of Mr. Willoughby in this book. I don't think it's reflective of the author and her best work or her best intentions. I don't really know kind of what went wrong, but it definitely went wrong. So in the book, this Asian character is living in Edinburgh, so he definitely stands out. He does not fit in. It seems like there are no other Asians in this place. And yeah, he's just really treated horribly. Now, it's not all bad. I mean, Jamie is kind to him. But Jamie is the one who changes his name from Yi-Ten Cho to Mr. Willoughby. Now, Jamie does it as kind of a kindness because he says Yi-Ten Cho sounds really horrible in the Gaelic. That's what everyone in Scotland speaks. It would just be easier for him to change his name. And of course, we know it would be easier for everyone to have a name, you know, that passes for English or sounds English or whatever, but that's really not fair. It's not that hard to learn people's names. It's a sign of respect. It's a basic human right. But at the time, you know, late 1700s Scotland, that wasn't the way that Jamie approached it. So Jamie saves his life. Yi-Ten Cho kind of feels indebted to Jamie. Jamie takes care of him. He works for Jamie, but he's clearly not happy. And I think Jamie could have done more. And I think this is a character flaw of Jamie, is that he frequently underestimates the people around him and takes care of them, but doesn't take enough care of them. So yeah, he saves Mr. Willoughby's life, or Yi-Ten Cho's life, but he doesn't help him to provide a good life for himself, right? Yi-Ten Cho is not happy. He's treated horribly by the people around him. And Jamie doesn't really make an effort to mitigate that for him. So that was a problem that I had with this book. Claire is definitely kinder to Yi-Ten Cho, more respectful, but she's a flawed character as well. She's coming from the late 1960s America. She has her own racial biases that I think come out in this book. So yeah, that was a problem that I had with the book. I didn't feel it was right to do a review or an update without mentioning it. That doesn't mean that I don't like the book. That doesn't mean that I think the author is some sort of racist. Not at all, not at all. I really admire Diana Gabaldon. I think she's a very intelligent person, very smart. I love reading her books. I'm so happy that she shared them with the world. It's okay to be critical of things that you love. That's okay. I've decided, for me, that's okay. Please don't come after me if you don't agree. Okay, the other two things that I'm going to talk about, I'm kind of calling Diana Gabaldon's Unflinching Eye. And maybe that's how Mr. Willoughby should be viewed too. With her unflinching eye, she has kind of painted us this picture in this novel. And one of, her unflinching gaze, we're talking about ships traveling from Europe to the Americas. And a big part of that story is the story of slavery worldwide. So we see in the 1960s, she has a friend, a colleague, a fellow physician who she went to med school with, Joe Abernathy. Love him, such a good character. I wish we had more of him, but it's just not very much. And he is Black. He is the only Black student in the class. She is the only female in the class. So they're natural allies and they become good friends. So really liked that part. When she goes back in time, she's not traveling on a slave ship. She's traveling on a ship with just regular cargo. But when they get to America, they're searching for young Ian, who's been kidnapped. And it's thought that he's going to be sold into slavery. He's white, but still. And they end up going to look, they're looking for him. And it is one of the most heart-wrenching scenes, I think, to read in the entire series. Maybe I'll change my mind as we keep reading and I remember other horrible things. Oh my gosh, it is tough. I did not skip over reading it, even though when we got to that part, I knew it was coming. I won't describe it here because it's very triggering, very upsetting. I'm really happy that she chose to include it. I'm really happy that she didn't just kind of glance over it, because I think you could. I think she could have written this book and not really mentioned it. But she doesn't. She chooses to dive into it, and it's all real. Hard to read, very emotional. Yeah, so her unflinching gaze goes on that part of world history. I think it's very important. Very upsetting though. Yeah. Okay, the other unflinching gaze that she has is on this kind of relationship dynamic, power dynamic, and relationship tropes or mores that were of the time and kind of still are in some cases. The character of Fergus, I do like Fergus. I think he has a cool story. In this book, we see adult Fergus. He's a grown man. He's 30 years old. He's 30, okay? That's not young. I'm a little over 30. It's not young. He falls in love with Marsley. She's 15. Okay, she's 15 years old. She is in love with him. She sneaks herself aboard this ship. She tells Jamie, we're handfast, we're getting married. I'm gonna be with this man. And she's fully a driving force in this wedding. It's not that Fergus is forcing her hand at all, but he's 15 years older. So what kind of influence does that have on a 15-year-old girl that, this sophisticated, suave, distinguished man is interested in you? So yeah, I thought that was, it was common for the time. It's still, socially acceptable to have these wide-ranging differences in age. And it's not that a difference in age is a problem. It's the age that she was when she met him, 15, very young. If that were to happen today, we would have a big problem with it, and rightly so. So yeah, and then Claire mentions a couple times that Fergus, he was born in a brothel. He was there until he was about 10 years old when he left France with Jamie and Claire. So he's very comfortable with his sexuality, other people's sexuality, and Claire thinks that Fergus is going to kind of run around on Marsley, and that's normal. That's how it is. And you see him kind of take a protective role with her. There's a dirty story being talked about on the ship at one point, and he covers her ears because he doesn't want her to hear it, even though they're getting married, and she's kind of an adult now. She's getting married. So I just thought that was interesting. I'm going to keep thinking about that relationship as I keep reading the next books. Again, it's not that now I don't like these books, I'm not going to read them. No, I still really enjoy the book. It wouldn't be a book if there weren't any conflict. It would not be a great book if it didn't make me re-examine my own feelings and either reaffirm my position or come away with a totally different one. So that's just the sign of a well-written novel, if it challenges you, right? It's not a good novel if it doesn't challenge you to rethink something. And those are my two kind of things that this has challenged with me. This book has challenged me to reread some of those scenes at the slave market, or dealing with that part of history, and then thinking about the power dynamic in relationships at that time, and how it affects the characters that we're meeting and that I'm growing to love. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. So final thoughts on this book. I definitely need a new copy. I lost another page at the front cover. Thankfully none of the story, just just some of that. I'm sure I will get a new copy eventually. I loved this book. I think that this is book 3. I think I still like book 1 the best, just because it's the first book. How can you not love the first book the best? The one that made you read the others? I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind. This book is a close second. It was an exciting, fast-paced read. Loved it. It made me laugh, made me cry, made me think, made me do all the things. So yeah, there you go. I am excited to keep reading. I am going to take just a tiny break, or maybe just read the next one a little slower. Hopefully the weather stays good, so I'm busier. I don't have as much time to read. But yeah, let me know what you thought. If you totally disagree with something that I said about the novel, let me know. If you think I'm on the right track with something, let me know that. If you're not reading these books, but if you're a friend of mine who's just watching to be supportive, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.